Imagine standing before a building so elegant that it feels untouchable. White stone glowing under city lights, flags dancing above its doors, history breathing through every window. To the world, this place represents success, wealth, and dreams fulfilled. But tonight, I invite you to look past the chandeliers and listen to the whispers hiding in the walls. When the Plaza first opened its doors, it wasn't just a hotel, it was a statement. America announcing to the world, "We have arrived." Kings slept there. Presidents walked its halls. Celebrities smiled for cameras at its entrance. Every room promised luxury. Every corner whispered power. But power always leaves shadows behind. Behind the polished marble floors were rooms where secrets were traded like currency. Deals were signed that reshaped fortunes overnight. Some legal, some dangerously close to ruin. Money flowed freely, but so did manipulation. Not everyone who entered left richer. Some left broken. Some never truly left at all. In suites meant for celebration, lives quietly unraveled. Marriages collapsed behind silk curtains. Addiction hid behind room service trays. Ambition pushed people past moral lines they swore they would never cross. The Plaza didn't judge, it watched. And it remembered. The staff saw everything. Bellhops who carried luggage heavier than gold. Housekeepers who entered rooms long after the laughter ended. They learned early silence was survival. You didn't repeat what you saw. You didn't ask why someone checked in smiling and checked out hollow-eyed. During America's most glamorous eras, the Plaza shined brightest and rotted deepest. While champagne flowed in ballrooms, desperation lingered in hallways. The building became a mirror of the nation itself, dazzling on the surface, deeply conflicted underneath. There were nights when powerful men made decisions there that never appeared in newspapers. Decisions that shifted markets, destroyed rivals, and protected reputations at any cost. History books would later speak of events, but never mention the rooms where those choices were born. Over time, ownership changed, fortunes rose and fell, but the darkness never fully disappeared. Renovations refreshed walls, not memories. You can replace furniture, polish floors, and repaint ceilings, but you cannot erase what a place has witnessed. The Plaza stands today as a monument, beautiful, iconic, admired. Tourists see elegance. Guests feel prestige. But if buildings could speak, this one wouldn't boast. It would warn. It would tell us that behind every symbol of success lies a story we're often afraid to hear. And as the doors continue to open each day, the Plaza remains what it has always been. A palace of dreams for some, and a quiet graveyard of secrets for others. The Plaza Hotel was never meant to be just a place to sleep. It was designed as a declaration. When it rose along Fifth Avenue, facing Central Park, it stood like a challenge to the world, saying that America no longer needed old European palaces to prove its greatness. This was the age of ambition, when the nation wanted monuments that didn't whisper refinement, but announced dominance. The Plaza was built to impress before a single word was spoken. Its size, its symmetry, its location all carefully chosen to command attention. Every stone was selected to communicate authority. The white façade wasn't just beautiful, it symbolized purity, permanence, and wealth that expected to last forever. Inside, the ceilings were intentionally high, not for comfort alone, but to make guests feel small in the presence of power. The chandeliers didn't simply light the rooms. They reminded visitors that they had entered a world where money ruled quietly. but absolutely. This hotel was crafted for the elite, not the ordinary traveler. It catered to industrial titans, political power brokers, royalty, and cultural icons, people whose names moved markets and shaped public opinion. Staying at the Plaza was not about rest, it was about belonging. If you passed through its doors, you were signaling that you had arrived at the top of American society. Luxury here was strategic. The ballrooms were designed to host events where influence could be exchanged behind polite smiles. The suites were built to host private negotiations, masked as celebrations. Even the corridors played their role, long, quiet, and discreet, allowing conversations to disappear before reaching the wrong ears. At its core, the Plaza embodied a powerful idea: that wealth could create its own universe, separate from consequence. It stood as proof that money could buy silence, privacy, and control. The hotel wasn't just reflecting American power, it was helping manufacture it, giving the nation a stage where ambition could dress itself in elegance. But with such intentional grandeur came an unspoken truth. When a place is built to glorify power, it inevitably attracts those who hunger for it most. The Plaza became a magnet for desire, financial, political, and personal. And where desire gathers in excess, something darker always follows. From the very beginning, the Plaza was less a hotel and more a throne, one that promised prestige to anyone wealthy enough to sit upon it, while quietly reminding the rest of the world exactly who was in control. Behind the glittering chandeliers and perfectly pressed curtains of the Plaza Hotel, there has always been another world. One the cameras never captured, and the history books politely ignored. Glamour is what the Plaza showed to the public, but secrecy is what allowed it to survive. Every luxurious surface worked like a mask, hiding stories that were never meant to be told. In rooms where laughter echoed during grand parties, silence often followed once the doors closed. Important conversations happened in low voices, late at night, when reputations were negotiated like contracts. Some guests came seeking pleasure, others protection. Affairs were hidden behind velvet drapes. Alliances were formed that would later destroy friendships, careers, even families. The Plaza became a place where trust was temporary and betrayal often arrived wearing a smile. Powerful figures learned quickly that the hotel offered more than comfort. It offered discretion. Staff were trained not just to serve, but to forget. Names were not repeated. Faces were not remembered. What happened inside a suite was expected to stay there forever. This culture of silence turned the Plaza into a vault of human secrets, locked not by walls, but by fear and loyalty. And then, there was the suffering no one applauded. Behind immaculate rooms were people unraveling under pressure. Artists crushed by expectation, business leaders haunted by their own ambition, lovers trapped in relationships they could not publicly escape. Some checked in hoping to feel powerful, only to confront how empty that power felt when the lights went out. The staff witnessed the quiet aftermath. Housekeepers entering rooms after arguments had ended, seeing shattered glass, stained pillows, letters torn apart and thrown away. Bellhops escorting guests who could barely stand, not from celebration, but from despair. These moments never reached newspapers, yet they repeated themselves year after year, hidden beneath layers of luxury. Betrayal didn't always come loudly. Sometimes it arrived as a signed document passed across a polished table. Sometimes as a whispered promise that was never kept. Careers were sacrificed for ambition. Loyalties were traded for access. And the Plaza, standing still and dignified, absorbed it all without reaction. What made the suffering truly silent was how well it blended in. In a place built for spectacle, pain had no audience. Guests cried behind soundproof doors. Decisions that ruined lives were made over champagne. The beauty of the hotel didn't prevent darkness, it softened it, made it easier to ignore. So while the Plaza sparkled as a symbol of elegance, it also became a sanctuary for secrets, a stage for betrayal, and a witness to suffering that never asked for attention. Its glamour didn't erase these stories. It protected them, sealing them into its walls, where they remain, unheard but ever present. Within the walls of the Plaza Hotel, worlds that were never meant to touch quietly collided. This was one of the few places on Earth where a head of state, a movie star, and a criminal mastermind could exist under the same roof, sometimes on the same floor, without ever acknowledging one another. The Plaza didn't discriminate. It welcomed status, fame, money, and danger with the same polished smile. Powerful elites arrived through the front doors, surrounded by aides and confidence. They moved with the certainty of people who believed history bent in their favor. For them, the Plaza was neutral ground, a place where influence could be exercised discreetly. Policies were influenced over dinner. Political favors were hinted at between courses. Decisions affecting millions were shaped not in government buildings, but in private suites dressed up as luxury escapes. Celebrities came chasing a different kind of power, attention. Cameras followed them to the entrance, flashes lighting up the night. But once inside, the Plaza offered protection from the very fame that fed them. Here, stars could remove their public masks. Some used the hotel to hide addictions, secret relationships, or exhaustion from living as a brand instead of a human being. Others used it to reinvent themselves, believing that proximity to wealth and influence might make their fame eternal. Then there were those who didn't belong to either world, at least not officially. Criminal figures learned that the Plaza's elegance made it the perfect cover. Expensive suits drew no suspicion. Large sums of money raised no questions. When wealth is expected, it becomes invisible. Deals involving fraud, corruption, and organized crime slipped easily into rooms, meant for champagne toasts and celebrations. What made these crossings dangerous wasn't just proximity, it was opportunity. A celebrity desperate for money could become leverage. A politician hungry for influence could be compromised. A criminal with access to both could manipulate them all. The Plaza became an ecosystem where power fed on power, regardless of how it was earned. Sometimes these worlds brushed past each other unknowingly. A pop icon stepping into an elevator, just as a deal involving stolen millions concluded upstairs. Other times, they intersected deliberately. Fame was used as distraction. Influence was traded for protection. Silence became the most valuable currency of all. The staff noticed patterns long before outsiders did. Certain guests never checked in under their real names. Certain rooms were always requested, always paid for in advance. Security tightened not because of danger, but because secrets were in the building. The Plaza adapted quietly, accommodating everyone without asking why. Inside those walls, morality blurred. Respectability and criminality wore similar faces. Wealth erased boundaries that society pretended were firm. And as elites, celebrities, and criminals crossed paths again and again. The Plaza became more than a hotel. It became a crossroads of ambition, temptation, and risk, where power recognized power, no matter its source. Money has always been the quiet heartbeat of the Plaza Hotel. Not the money guests spent on rooms or champagne, but the money that moved invisibly through its halls. While the public admired the glamour, the real history of the Plaza was being written in numbers, signatures, and whispered agreements that never reached daylight. From its earliest years, the hotel became a favored stage for high-stakes business. Executives and financiers chose it not for comfort alone, but for the protection it offered. A meeting held in a Plaza suite carried a message. This was serious, exclusive, and meant to stay private. Contracts were drafted late at night, away from offices and paper trails. Handshakes sealed deals that would later be described as market shifts, while their human costs remained unspoken. As fortunes grew, so did temptation. The Plaza witnessed the rise of business empires built on speculation, manipulation, and calculated risk. Some deals collapsed spectacularly, dragging investors and employees down with them. Others succeeded, but only because ethical lines were quietly crossed. Insider information, hidden partnerships, and backroom financing found a safe home behind luxury doors. Financial scandals didn't always explode immediately. Often, they began softly in the Plaza, an introduction here, a secret loan there, a promise of future influence exchanged over an expensive meal. By the time the truth surfaced, the origin had vanished into polished floors and forgotten guest lists. The hotel itself became entangled in these financial storms. Ownership changed hands through controversial deals, leveraged purchases, and risky investments. Each transition carried whispers of debt, pressure, and power struggles. The Plaza wasn't just hosting financial drama, it was living it. Its survival depended on the same aggressive financial tactics unfolding within its rooms. Dark business deals thrived because the environment encouraged confidence without accountability. When surrounded by wealth, it became easy to believe that consequences were optional. Losses could be hidden. Failures could be reframed. And when scandals finally reached the public, the Plaza remained spotless, untouched by blame, its reputation intact. Employees sensed the instability long before headlines did. Sudden changes in management, restricted access to certain floors, conversations that stopped when staff entered the room. The building felt tense, like a beautiful facade holding its breath while money decided its fate. Over time, these financial shadows layered themselves into the Plaza's identity. It became a monument not just to success, but to the belief that wealth could rewrite reality. The dark deals and scandals didn't stain its image. They shaped it quietly, reinforcing the idea that behind every symbol of luxury lies a ledger filled with risk, ambition, and secrets no one wants audited. Behind the golden doors of the Plaza Hotel lives quietly unraveled in ways no guest brochure could ever describe. These doors were designed to impress, heavy, polished, guarded by luxury, but once they closed, they sealed people inside moments they never planned to face. The world outside saw glamour, inside, reality waited without mercy. Some arrived believing success would finally make them whole. They had money, influence, admiration, everything they were told mattered. Yet when the silence of a private suite replaced applause, many were forced to confront emptiness they had spent years running from. The Plaza became a place where people discovered that achievement does not protect against loneliness. There were lovers who met in secrecy, convinced that passion justified deception. Promises were whispered late into the night, futures imagined that could never exist in daylight. When those doors opened again, someone always walked out changed, carrying guilt, heartbreak, or the quiet realization that desire can destroy just as easily as it excites. Some tragedies were slow and invisible. Addiction hid comfortably behind room service carts and privacy signs. Alcohol and pills blended easily into luxury, unnoticed because excess was expected here. Guests spiraled quietly, surrounded by beauty that made their suffering easier to ignore and harder to escape. Others faced pressure so immense it crushed them in silence. Business leaders who feared collapse, artists who felt their relevance fading, public figures trapped by images they could no longer live up to. Inside those rooms, strong voices broke down, and confident faces dissolved into exhaustion and fear. The staff became unwilling witnesses. Housekeepers discovered rooms heavy with emotion. Tears dried into pillowcases, shattered mirrors carefully cleaned before sunrise, handwritten notes left behind and discreetly removed. Bellhops learned to recognize the weight of silence in a guest's walk, the difference between celebration and despair. Some stories ended quietly, without headlines. A guest who never returned. A reservation canceled without explanation. A room left untouched longer than expected. These moments slipped into the building's memory, unacknowledged yet unforgettable. What made these tragedies especially haunting was how well they were hidden. Pain blended seamlessly into luxury. Suffering wore expensive clothing. No one questioned sadness when it arrived in first class. Behind those golden doors, the Plaza didn't just host success. It absorbed failure, grief, and regret. And though the doors opened again each morning, polished and welcoming, the echoes of those personal tragedies never truly left the rooms where they were born. The Plaza Hotel stood dressed in elegance. But beneath that flawless exterior, it quietly observed something far less beautiful. The slow erosion of morals hidden behind wealth and refinement. Publicly, the hotel symbolized class, tradition, and sophistication. Privately, it became a place where values bent easily, softened by money, and protected by privacy. In its public spaces, guests spoke of honor, success, and legacy. They toasted to achievements, posed for photographs, and played their roles perfectly. But once doors closed, the rules changed. The same people who preached integrity outside often abandoned it inside. Luxury created distance from consequence, and distance made compromise feel harmless. Lies became easier when spoken in silk-lined rooms. Infidelity felt less shameful when disguised as romance. Exploitation wore the costume of opportunity. The Plaza didn't cause these choices. It simply provided a space where people felt powerful enough to make them without fear. Moral decay didn't arrive dramatically. It crept in quietly. It showed up in small decisions justified as temporary, harmless, or necessary. A promise broken for advantage. A favor exchanged for silence. A line crossed because no one was watching, or so it seemed. Over time, these small betrayals stacked upon each other, forming a culture where ethics were flexible and accountability optional. The elegance itself played a dangerous role. When surrounded by beauty, people began to believe their actions were equally refined. Cruel decisions felt sophisticated. Greed felt strategic. Self-interest felt deserved. The environment softened guilt, making wrongdoing feel less like a sin and more like a privilege. Those who worked within the hotel saw the contrast most clearly. Polite smiles in public followed by cold indifference in private. Guests who demanded perfection from staff while excusing their own worst behavior. Respect became conditional, granted only to those with power or status. What made this decay especially haunting was how invisible it was to the outside world. Newspapers praised the plaza as a cultural icon. Tourists admired its charm. Few ever questioned what happened behind its elegance. The hotel became a stage where morality was performed, not practiced. Over time, the plaza didn't just witness moral decay, it normalized it. When wrongdoing repeats often enough without consequence, it stops feeling wrong. It becomes tradition. And beneath the polished floors and golden light, the hotel quietly held the evidence of how easily elegance can coexist with ethical collapse. The plaza remained beautiful, admired, untouched by scandal, while inside, it reflected a deeper truth that when power is wrapped in luxury, morality often becomes the first thing left behind. Inside the Plaza Hotel, the most powerful people were not always the ones wearing tailored suits or arriving in luxury cars. Often, it was the staff, the bellhops, housekeepers, concierge, and security who knew the most and spoke the least. Their job was not only service, but silence. From their first day, insiders learned an unspoken rule. What you see here does not exist outside these walls. Names were forgotten on command. Faces blurred into anonymity. Questions were dangerous, curiosity unwelcome. Discretion was not a skill. It was survival. A single mistake, a single word spoken to the wrong person, could end a career overnight. They saw the truth behind the masks. Guests who smiled publicly and raged privately. Celebrations that ended in broken furniture and quiet apologies. Deals that felt wrong even before the signatures dried. The staff carried these moments with them, storing memories they could never release. Housekeepers entered rooms long after secrets had unfolded. They cleaned evidence without knowing the full story, and sometimes knowing far too much. Letters torn and discarded. Expensive gifts left behind in shame. Objects that told stories no one would ever ask them to explain. Concierges became human vaults. They arranged discreet transportation, untraceable reservations, and sudden departures at impossible hours. They learned not to judge why a guest needed privacy, only how quickly they needed it. Security guards understood the patterns. Certain floors were protected more than others. Certain guests required silence, not safety. They watched conflicts unfold and disappear without reports, without records. The weight of these secrets followed staff home. They carried them into quiet apartments, long subway rides, and sleepless nights. But speaking was never an option. The plaza rewarded loyalty generously and punished betrayal without mercy. What made their silence most powerful was that it was never formally demanded. No one had to say, "Don't talk." Everyone already knew. In a place built on prestige, silence was the price of belonging. So while history remembers the plaza through famous names and grand events, its truest witnesses remain unheard. The insiders who knew everything, said nothing, and carried the building's darkest truths without ever being allowed to speak them aloud. The Plaza Hotel did not speak, protest, or take sides, but year after year, it watched. Standing in the same place while generations passed through its doors, the plaza became a silent observer of America itself, reflecting how the nation's values shifted beneath the illusion of progress. In its early years, the hotel represented aspiration rooted in formality, discipline, hierarchy, and clear social lines. Wealth was displayed carefully. Power moved slowly and ceremoniously. Guests dressed not just for comfort, but for status. Respectability mattered, at least in public. The Plaza mirrored an America that believed success should look controlled and dignified. As time moved forward, the tone changed. Elegance gave way to excess. Wealth became louder, faster, more aggressive. The Plaza began hosting a new kind of guest, one less interested in legacy and more obsessed with visibility. Status shifted from discretion to display. Influence no longer needed to hide. It wanted to be seen. With these changes came a subtle moral shift. Where restraint once ruled, entitlement took its place. Guests demanded more, questioned less, and expected instant satisfaction. Privacy was still valued, but now it served different purposes, not to protect dignity, but to avoid accountability. The Plaza watched ambition become ruthless. Success stopped being about building something lasting and started being about winning at any cost. The conversations inside its rooms changed tone. Once about progress and vision, they became about dominance, leverage, and survival. Even fame evolved within its walls. Early celebrities sought refinement and respect. Later ones chased relevance and attention. The hotel adapted without judgment, accommodating every era, every attitude, every contradiction. Social boundaries also shifted. Rules that once felt unbreakable softened. Behavior that would have been scandalous in one decade became expected in the next. A Plaza didn't correct these changes, it absorbed them, storing each phase like layers in its foundation. Through wars, booms, crises, and cultural revolutions, the building remained constant while values transformed around it. It saw ideals praised, abandoned, and replaced, sometimes within the same generation. And in its silence, the Plaza became more honest than any monument. It didn't celebrate change or mourn decline. It simply bore witness. Its walls reflect a deeper truth about America. That values are not fixed, they evolve, erode, and reinvent themselves, while institutions quietly adapt. Watching history unfold without ever speaking a word. The beauty of the Plaza Hotel was never accidental. Every polished surface, every carefully balanced chandelier, every perfectly framed view was designed to captivate, to distract. Beauty here worked like a spell, encouraging admiration while gently discouraging deeper questions. People looked up, not inward. And in that space between wonder and silence, ambition and greed quietly did their work. Ambition walked these halls dressed as confidence. Guests arrived believing the Plaza was proof that they had made it, that success was now permanent. But ambition is rarely satisfied. Inside those elegant rooms it sharpened. People wanted more power, more influence, more control. The hotel became a place where desire escalated, because being surrounded by greatness made mediocrity feel unbearable. Greed followed naturally. In an environment where excess felt normal, limits felt unnecessary. Deals were pushed further. Risks were justified. The line between enough and never enough blurred until it disappeared entirely. Money was no longer a tool. It became an obsession, measured not by need, but by dominance. What made this greed dangerous was how quietly it operated. No shouting, no chaos, just calm voices, soft laughter, and signatures placed on paper that would later cost others their livelihoods, homes, or futures. Destruction didn't arrive violently. It arrived politely, wearing refinement. The beauty of the plaza softened the consequences. When harm was wrapped in luxury, it didn't feel like harm. When ambition destroyed others indirectly, it felt abstract. People left believing they had simply done business, never fully acknowledging the damage left behind. The destruction was often invisible. Careers collapsed far from the hotel. Families fractured elsewhere. Communities suffered consequences, traced back to decisions made in rooms that remained spotless. The plaza stayed pristine while the impact rippled outward, unseen and unclaimed. Even personal destruction hid comfortably inside beauty. People sacrificed relationships, health, and identity chasing the image the plaza represented. They mistook access for fulfillment, luxury for meaning. And when they realized the emptiness, the building offered no answers, only silence. What makes the plaza's legacy unsettling is not that ambition and greed existed there, but how well they were concealed. The beauty didn't just coexist with destruction, it protected it. It allowed harmful actions to feel justified, even elegant. So while the world continues to admire the plaza's grandeur, its true history lies beneath the surface, where beauty did not prevent ambition from consuming, greed from spreading, or quiet destruction from unfolding unnoticed, room by room. And so, when you look at the Plaza Hotel, you are not just looking at a building. You are looking at a mirror of ambition dressed as elegance, of greed softened by beauty, of power protected by silence. Its walls do not scream their history. They don't need to. They stand calmly, confidently, knowing that the most dangerous stories are not the loud ones, but the ones hidden behind gold doors and polite smiles. The plaza remains flawless to the eye, admired by millions. But within its silence lives a truth far more unsettling, that greatness without conscience leaves scars no luxury can erase. And some legacies, no matter how beautiful, are built on shadows that never truly fade.